All right, welcome to the Mike White Podcast, Episode 2. We got Texas Tech track and cross country alumni or alumnus, I don't know how you say it, and a mechanical engineer by trade, Mr. Clark Blunt. How you doing, Clark?
Hey, MJ or Mike. Doing really well over here. How about yourself?
I'm great. Where are you right now?
Right now I'm in Baltimore, Maryland, but I've been all over the place.
Well,
So I'm happy to be here right now.
I love the backdrop. I know Clark just got himself a new little town row home there in Baltimore, and it's sweet. I got to visit it this summer. So congrats on that.
Thank you very much.
So I really just wanted to jump into your life story so far. I know that a lot of people are wanting to be Division I athletes. That's a really cool deal. That was a goal of mine. I never got there. But so just your journey to that, where'd you start out getting into athletics?
Well, I started athletics at a pretty young age. I lived in California, and I played a lot of water polo. And so I kind of thought that was going to be what I was going to do up until I moved to Texas, and they don't have water polo there. So I kind of had to.
Did you know that, or did you? I mean, were you bummed when you found that out? I never even heard of a water polo team growing up.
I was pretty upset about it. We tried to make water polo work. We made a commute, and that was about 45 minutes there, and practice was like 2 hours. And then we tried driving back, and it just didn't make sense to keep going.
Who has the water polo team in Texas?
It's in Rockwall.
Okay.
And actually, they were pretty good. I remember it's my very first practice, and I went out there, and it was just like 8th grade Clark, and it was like from 8th grade all the way through college, everybody was playing. And so I was playing with an Olympian at the time, and so it was definitely different. The community was so small that you just kind of had to make do with what you had. But I mean, so it didn't make any sense for us to keep going there. It was just too small.
Well, I can see how that built your kind of cardio base, because it seems pretty brutal. You're treading water the whole time, and people are really. A lot of action goes on underneath the water line that you don't see. I would imagine.
Oh, absolutely! It's an aggressive sport. It teaches you to have a little bit of grit, and so that was fun. I really enjoyed it, and everybody. It felt like everybody was out to hurt you, and so it was definitely an interesting sport. But I found that I was pretty good at it because I could go longer and like just keep swimming and keep driving whenever other people kind of got worn out. And I don't know what that had to do with. I don't know if I just had a good aerobic base or what it was, but I enjoyed that up until I had to give it up,
So did you realize you had that endurance, and is why you kind of went into long distance running, or how did you get introduced to just being miserable for multiple hours or an hour on it?
Well, I was actually kind of, whenever water polo was over, I was kind of just content with just being good at math or something. I was happy just kind of being a regular guy, not worried about soccer or athletics. And then I think you were in the health class in our brand new high school, where we went out and ran the mile. And then
that was middle school. Coach
I was in
Reeser.
middle school, yeah, with Coach Reeser, yeah. I remember I ran that, and then at the time it was a brand new high school, so I like to say that I set the school record, which I did. I set the school record, and then after that, I remember Coach Reeser said, "You don't really have a choice. You're going to have to run cross country at this point," and so that was just kind of how it went. I ended up joining the cross country team, and then I really enjoyed that. I think I had some really good coaches over at middle school, and I think I enjoyed just the consistency. I also found that I really enjoyed like pushing myself beyond where I was comfortable. It was kind of like the same feeling that I had in water polo, and so I really enjoyed pushing myself like that, and I think that's kind of what I got hooked on, and so ever since then I just kept running, and then I guess I found my spot.
Yeah, I think you're understating there when you got hooked on it because I remember, going to school with you. You never skipped on your miles. You always had your mileage limit every week, and you're just either always running, and then uh, that's that's pretty much all I remember. Like I feel like we were either running and going to school, and then you would probably just rest or sleep the rest of the time because you'd
Yeah.
running so much, you'd be exhausted.
It
But
took me a pretty good while before I could figure that out. Freshman year, I was I was just kind of having fun out there, and I remember I went to like a running camp, and I sat down and I sat at the lectures there, and this guy was just saying stuff that made too much sense. They were talking about running mileage. They were talking about getting in your base, and then I guess it made a lot of sense to me. And ever since then, I kind of figured out how you're supposed to run and what it takes to be a good runner. And it was like sophomore year that I finally stopped like running in basketball shorts, and I ran in shoes that actually fit. So it took some time for sure.
was that the camp in New Mexico, the Taos camp?
That I ended up doing that one. That one was incredible. I remember running up in altitude there. This one was called Gold Camp, and that was in North Texas. And that I mean that the coach there he'd been coaching for a really long time. He also coached at Baylor for a little while, and so he really knew how to present the information, and he really knew kind of what it took to get to be like a D1 athlete. And so that was a great opportunity. And I also I actually went with a couple of guys from Frisco. I don't know if you remember Topper and Joey, but it
Yeah.
was nice to have some competition there because it kind of held us all, to be pretty honest.
No, definitely. And I think I always thought Coach Littlefield was a great coach too. I mean, I know there's always different approaches to training, but she was one of those coaches where you never really wanted to have an excuse, and she always pushed you.
Oh,
So I thought,
absolutely. I think it takes a great coach like Coach Littlefield. Well, she was a D1 athlete, an old state champion, so she knew like what it took to stagger your miles, and she knew what a week should look like in workouts, and how important a long run was. So it's that little foundation that you need to that. I mean, if you know how to work out, that's how you get to be. I mean, better than most of the other kids in high school. But if you want to compete D1, that's absolutely what you need to have.
yeah. So what would you recommend for a high school athlete right now, or because it's different where you're still growing, but I'm sure there's a, a best way to train. What's a weekly kind of workout schedule
Ooh,
for a long distance runner? Put
that's
you
a
on the
tough
spot
one.
here.
Yeah. I would, I'd always encourage you focus on having a consistent increase in your mileage up until you really start racing. And so figuring out exactly what sort of mileage you need for the week is probably going to be the most important thing up front. But then what you're going to want to do is towards the start of your season, you'll want to focus on your high mileage. So you'll probably have 3 recovery runs, and that could vary on distance. And then you also have that kind of a speed focused workout as well, one that like a fartlek or a tempo run, as well as maybe some interval work, some longer interval work if we're talking cross country. But you're going to want to have 3 recovery runs, 2 workouts, kind of early on in the season, and then you're always going to want to have your long run. So however long that long run is, or whatever makes sense on the distance there. And I always like to really hammer those. I like to make those long runs something that tested me. And so I don't know if you remember us going out on our long runs, but that was something that I really wanted to focus on. And so I would get ready for those. And then I don't know if you can tell I've got a dog, if that's not me squeaking toys. But so I would do that for sure. And then Sunday, you take it easy, right? And so that'd be your day to go ahead and really focus on a very light run, something that you could relax. Because next week you're going to hit it all over again.
Yeah. So you say tempo run. When we were doing, I remember, I think high school, we would do like 20 minutes, and it would be like pretty much as fast as you could do 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. Did that, like, I'm sure, did that go higher when you're in college, or is 20 minutes like the best amount of time, or did you try to push that even farther?
I think it does vary. So I would encourage you, if you wanted to compete at a really high level, what you'd want to do is you'd start off at a lower tempo, or a lower duration of the tempo run. So if you start off with 15 minutes, or you could even start off with 10 minutes, right? But run it hard. You'd want to take it seriously, run it at anywhere between 90 and 85% of what you would try to run in a race. Figure out that pace and then run that. And then I know in college, I mean, it's a different beast, but in college I ended up running like a 45-minute tempo. And yeah. I'll tell you what, those are a real gut check. We would do that right in the middle of the season to just like really push ourselves. And then after that, I mean, it was getting ready for conference and everything. But as long as you get those tempos run in, I mean, it's important to supplement that with your mileage and just making sure that you know what that pace feels like and know what it feels like to really push yourself in kind of the same setting that it'd be like in a race. But you also need to make sure that you're hitting those races and getting in there with people that are going to be around your same speed, maybe even a little bit faster, so that you know what it feels like. Because I can't tell you what a shock it was whenever we were in high school. Because in high school, the competition's kind of sparse.
Oh yeah,
but
you run by yourself.
Yeah, you run. Especially if you're a good athlete, you're going to be out there running by yourself. And then you get to regionals, right? Or maybe even state. Maybe it takes you to state. But all of a sudden, that caliber of running all of a sudden jumped up to where everybody's right around the same pace as you. And that, if you're not out there during your regular season running with people that are the same pace as you, or maybe even faster, and you don't know how to run like that, or run with a group, or run with a pack, it's going to be a complete shock to you. So I think it's so important to get out and be with competition that's kind of similar to what you should be running or what you aspire to be. That's always tough in high school.
Yeah, how frustrating was that for the first time when you're used to just leading the pack, and then all of a sudden you see these bastards ahead of you, and you're trying to keep up, but then I don't know, like, do you remember not being first for the first time?
I do remember that. I remember like sophomore year, it was just we were running at like really small meets, and I was just kind of winning. We're just going to those tiny meets that don't have a lot of athletes, and I just kept winning. And you feel like you're on top of the world. And then all of a sudden, I remember it was regionals where everybody just took off, and I was like, I don't even know what to do right here. And so, I'm glad that I figured out that I needed to just gut up and hang out with the pack. But it was a surprise. And I remember it was sophomore year, I just finished, and I had never felt like that before, but I was just happy that I could finish that kind of with the people that was there. It was definitely a surprise, though.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of anything you do is if you have somebody either just for accountability or someone else to that's doing the same thing to push you to different levels that you didn't even know was possible. So I
Yeah.
don't know. I think that's huge of trying to find the people, either someone that's doing something you want to do or just someone with the same interests. It's huge. But I wanted to circle back on so the workout. So you said fartlek too. So fartlek, if I remember, you do like pretty much a sprint and then you slow down to a jog.
hmm
And what's the ratio? Like, is it 45 minutes to 15 seconds or 45 seconds to 15 seconds or how would you do your fartleks?
I think so. Starting off, I would say if you did 45 seconds on and then 15 seconds off, it'd be a good one. You want to vary the time on and time off again. But I would say if you work your way up to maybe like a minute on to 30 seconds off, needed that 15 times, I think that'd be a good like end of season goal to have. And what you'd want to do is you'd want to focus on getting getting your pace up to race pace or maybe even a little bit faster, and just focus on driving and just really going as hard as you can while you or not as hard as you can. You never necessarily want to do that unless you're doing strides, but you want to make sure that you're feeling the workout right at the end. So one of the key things that you can figure out is where do you go anaerobic. So when do your muscles stop eating the oxygen that they need in there to all of a sudden where do you go and your muscles are basically eating themselves, trying to get the energy that they need. So once you figure out where that is, you'd want to finish a fartlek right before that threshold. And if you can, once you figure that out, that's basically what you want to do all the time. On a tempo run, you basically want to sit right at that threshold up until the very end, and maybe you just touch it a little bit. Just go up and press that line just a little bit, and then come right back down. But on a fartlek, that's not as hard as you want to press yourself. Does that make it? Does that
Can you?
make MJ? Tell me, did that make any sense?
No, that makes sense. But I can't picture myself knowing when I go anaerobic. Or do you start getting a little like blurry vision? Does everything start going gray, or how do you know when you're not using oxygen anymore?
That's a good question. Yeah, I would say you typically feel it. So it, you that
Pain? Is it
yeah.
need
So
pain
you
threshold?
would. I think what you said right there is where I would typically try to recognize it. Once I start feeling it in my head, does that make sense? Your vision does kind of start to go blurry. That's kind of where you're pushing yourself a little bit
Okay.
harder than I guess it's probably pretty good. It's all there's everything is so good in moderation, right? If you do it right.
Is it a heart rate aspect to it at all, or do you even track your heart rate? Is that anything you care about?
I think there's a lot of value in tracking your heart rate. If you get to that level, I think if I was just in middle school, just trying to run my mileage, or if I was building my base even for college, I probably wouldn't worry about my heart rate. But if you wanted to compete at the highest level you can, watching that heart rate and then figuring out kind of where that threshold is, because you can basically I don't know how into the weeds we want to get, but basically what you can do is figure out your VO2 max, and what you'll do is you'll track that heart rate and make sure that you're not exceeding that in a workout that you don't necessarily need to pass that on.
No, so this VO2 max thing, I've always heard of zone two and being like the best for fat burning. So if people are trying to lose weight, I always hear you need to be in your zone two heart rate, which is 180 minus your age. So I don't know if you've heard of that or what is VO2 max?
Well, Well, you might know even a little bit more than I do. I was just always worried about monitoring my heart rate. Really, all that it does is how much oxygen can you sustain in your blood, basically, while you're working out, and that's really a good gauge of your fitness and really how well can you compete. That might I've never heard kind of that standard there, but that sounds pretty interesting.
Yeah,
You
I
want to go
mean,
on
I think
about that?
there's more direct ways to for the different zones, but the easy calculation zone 2, 180 minus your age. But that's purely for fat burning. It's not like if you're training to be, break records or anything.
Yeah, I was super lazy. I had a Garmin watch, and that would track my heart rate, and then each run it kind of updated, and after thousands of miles, it kind of figured out where I sat, and so I was pretty lucky to just have that tell me where I needed to be.
Yeah, that's when those I feel like they were pretty early adopters to the watches when we were starting to run. Is that the one that would yell at you like if you're off your pace at all and start
Yeah,
beeping at you?
yeah. I would set it to if it was called a shadow runner, and I remember I would
Uh,
set that up, and I would enjoy if I said, all right, on this tempo run, I wanted to run, I don't know, 6:45s, right? And then I dipped below that pace, and it would beep at me and say, hey, you better pick it up. I
you're being
enjoyed
lazy.
that. But eventually, you kind of want to, you don't necessarily want to run a completely flat time. And so your tempo runs, especially when you're running 45 minutes, you kind of want to start a little bit conservative so that you can finish that, figure out your pace, and then really slowly build up to the right pace and then hold that for the rest of it. So there's such, as soon as I think you figure out where you need to be eventually, and that takes mileage and that takes listening to your body. And I think that's probably the most important thing that you can learn to do. I remember when I ran in college my freshman year, I remember every single recovery run in high school, I wanted to hit it hard. I wanted to figure out, like, all right, I'm wasting my time if I'm not working hard. But I went to college, and I was at Texas Tech, and I had the national champion on my team. And one time we were running a recovery run, and I said, we are running far too slow. We were basically walking, and we just kept running it. And I turned to him. It was like one of our first runs, and I said, Kennedy, we are running way too slow. I said, we're getting nothing from this. And he turned to me and he said, hey, listen, I'm the national champion. You should probably listen to me. And I remember I remember that so clearly, because then it was only later whenever we had our first tempo run, and he goes, Clark, I'm gonna run 5 minutes flat for the very first mile. Then I'm going to run 4:57. And then on the third mile, I'm going to run 4:45. And then I will run 4:30, and then 4:30, and then 4:22. And I was like, good luck. I was like, good luck. I said, you will never be able. I remember this. I was like, good luck, Kennedy. I wish you the best of luck on this tempo run. And we got done, and he shows me his splits, and it was spot on. And this, it's because he told me all the time, it was because he could listen to his body. And so that's the Kenyan way, and I think that's the best way to figure out how to run right.
I wonder if there's any um, legitimacy to, like, they talk about the slower runs. I don't know if it's true or not, but almost maximizing the flow of blood through your bloodstream, whereas your fast runs and you're pushing yourself makes your heart real strong, and
Hmm.
can strengthen your heart. But then the slower ones somehow, like, almost, if your arteries are a freeway, it adds some extra lanes. I don't know if you've heard anything like that.
I've
I'm
always
just talking
I've always
gibberish.
thought of it. I've always thought of it as it's maybe I can relate it to weightlifting. I think a lot of people can relate to that. So if I were to look at my tempo runs as a day that I really lifted hard, right? So I went out and I really pushed myself. And what I did there was I tore down those muscles. So my muscles have been torn down, and I'm producing lactic acid. And what they're trying to do is they're now trying to heal. And so what a recovery day is meant to do is give those muscles time to heal. And so how I've always pictured it is that's my opportunity to maybe flush out lactic acid or give my body an opportunity to get the mileage that it needs to have, because I certainly don't want it to settle and think to itself, all right, the new standard is, hey, we're not going to have this many mileage that we're going to run each week. I don't want to get my body to become complacent. I get my mileage. I get to flush my lactic acid out, as well as it gives the muscles that I worked really hard a chance to recover. Is that kind of how you imagined it as well?
Yeah, I think the recovery is huge. That was another thing I was going to ask you about is, are you on the ice bath train? Do you think that's a important way, or are you cold showers or ice bath recovery person?
That is an excellent question. That is something that I debated with myself all the way through college, because I never knew if it was working or not. I don't know. I don't even know if ice works, but I did it. I know all of the people that were a lot smarter than me. They believed in it, and so supposedly there's science out there. And I mean, I did it through high school. I did it wrong all through high school, but I did it in college for sure as well.
You're wrong.
Oh my goodness, MJ! I don't know if you remember those ice baths. We were taking like 36-degree ice baths, and that's like criminal. I remember feeling
you just filled the tub with ice, right?
That was awful. It was so bad. I remember feeling my toes curl up so aggressively, and it was too cold. You want it to be like, I swear it should be like 50 degrees at the coldest.
Oh, that's weak.
Yeah, maybe it is. I don't know. I was also very tired. If I was taking an ice bath, it was after a workout too. I was kind of beat up after that.
It wakes you up though, right? Like once you get out of it, once you take an ice bath, it's a whole new day.
It does. See, in my mind, I thought it was making me stronger, but who knows if that's right.
I think it's. I know I shifted to doing like the cold showers in the morning just to wake myself up. And
oh, really?
If there's any recovery aspect to it, that'd be awesome. But I really want to get one of those. I mean, I'm in an apartment right now, but if I had a house like you, I'd be interested to get one of those installed. They got like the machines you can get.
Yeah.
But
I mean, you can make one pretty easy, but you want that water to circulate for sure. Do you remember when we used to sit in the huge water trough and we just sit in there together?
Yeah, it was and I only did it once there. It was like before regionals, and the whole team, like we just it was the whole morning because there's, what is it, probably 50 people in cross country between girls and the guys, and just all took turns, like 5 at a time going in the ice bath.
Yeah. Yeah, you want that water to circulate, and I think it's because of frostbite. But yeah, that was a good time. I think I enjoyed it, even though sometimes whenever they first started throwing the ice in, it probably was too cold. Remember how people were crying? I remember kids from other high school were passing out because it was so cold. Yeah, maybe that's too cold. But I remember doing it, and I kind of liked it because I was with like my whole team. And I think if you got a team that you gut it out with, I think you race a little bit harder too. That's just me.
No, definitely. And then the other workout I wanted to ask you about, I thought was the worst experience in my whole life. I've never felt more miserable. But mile repeats, how often do you like those, and how beneficial are they?
I think I'm going to give you the most boring answers, MJ. I should take a firm stance on something, but I think again, in moderation, those mile repeats are good for you. I definitely like them because again, those are a gut check. I remember for me, it was the 400-meter repeats. Those killed me. Those absolutely killed me. And I guess I think I got a good enough base that I could do those mile repeats well. But I think having those workouts that just absolutely kill you, I think those are probably the most important ones that you can have as long as you give yourself enough time to recover. But I remember those. I remember those being absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
It sounds like you remember them fondly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if they changed in college, but I remember doing, it was 6. And gosh, after the first like 3, I was beat, and then you gotta gut it out and get those next 3 done, and the rest in between seems shorter and shorter.
Oh yeah.
But gosh, it was terrible. I guess it's like a tempo run. It's like a tempo run, but you actually get some rest in between. But the fact that you get the rest, then you have more of an expectation for yourself to keep trying to keep the same pace.
I always swore that it was that stopping and letting my heart kind of rest a little while. I swear that was the thing that absolutely killed me, is feeling that spike again, starting the next one. I think that one was always the killer for me. I remember in college, what we did was we would do circuits, and so we would progressively go up to mile repeats. But for your rest, what you did was you did body weight squats, and you did weighted presses, and so you did dips, and so we were doing push-ups and V-ups, and we were doing all these workout exercises as our rest, and then we'd take off again. And those killed me. It was my mile repeats in college, and I'll tell you what, that put me on a different planet. I remember walking up to the line, I couldn't see nothing. I was just there to gut it out there at the end. And I think sometimes you push yourself a little bit too hard, but those are the workouts that kind of get you to the point where you can gut it out in the middle of the race. I think my most influential person that I ever read or saw anything about was Prefontaine, and that was kind of his real message: is can you gut it out harder than anybody else? And so if I didn't have my circuits and you didn't have your mile repeats, we knew for a fact that when it comes to the race, we can't just figure out how to gut it out. We needed to have that opportunity to gut it out beforehand. So I'm also, again, I'm still I think I'm an outlier. I kind of enjoy that pain. But I think you have to have that.
Is that kind of why you wanted to keep running and go run in college, or did you always know you wanted to run at the next level?
It's a good question. I knew pretty early on in high school that I wanted to do something. I wanted to be good at something. And so I remember really diving into cross country and really focusing on that. And I said, this is the thing that I want to be good at. So I took that and I threw everything that I could at it. And it took a lot of work, and it took a lot of learning, and it took a lot of time figuring out what my body needed. How do I need to hydrate? How do I need to sleep at night? But I figured out that this was something that I wanted to be serious about, and then I invested all that I could into it.
Yeah, and what's like the networking like when you're probably starting like your junior year, and do you start reaching out to colleges yourself, or did you have people reach out to you?
I had a little bit of both. I remember reaching out to quite a few colleges just to gauge interest, see what it would take to run on their team. And then I remember there was recruiters that'd be standing at the end of at the finish line of regionals, just writing down names, and they were also
they'd always be gone by the time I finished, so I never saw them.
That's not true, MJ. Not even close to it. They were there. They were taking notes for sure, and I think that helped out a lot. You know, I think if you compete well, if you race well, you get your name out there. But I think a lot of the legwork, if you want to go someplace that you really want to go to, I think that falls on whoever wants to go to that college. So I reached out to quite a few places. I think Texas Tech did reach out to me, so I was happy to do that. Oh, you know what? I actually went to one of their running camps. That was that high altitude running camp over in New Mexico, and
Okay.
I networked. Oh man, I was schmoozing up there harder than I possibly could have, and so I got some one-on-one time with the coaches that were there. And I still think those running camps were the best opportunity for me because every camp that I went to, every single one that those coaches reached out to me, and so I enjoyed that. And I think networking is important. And also, I mean, I was really close with all the like competitive runners over in Frisco. It was important that I had them as my running group to keep me honest, to make sure that we were all like, the Frisco team was going to be a powerhouse. And I think that's something that we really wanted to encourage. And that helped out too, I think, because I'd bring up Joey, and I'd bring up Topper, and I'd bring up Turner Poole, even though he's a little bit younger than us. And I think that helped out as well, because I think they did the same for me.
Nice. And what was kind of the deciding factor of being a Red Raider?
Ooh, that took a lot. I remember I went on several school visits, and I'll tell you, there was quite a few colleges that I really, really liked. But I went to Texas Tech on my visit, and I met Kennedy, who I was talking about earlier, who was the national champion. I met him there, and I got a chance to talk to him. And I remember walking around the campus and going out on a I think it was a long run with the team, and just getting along with them, and got to see the facility. And I knew that the track team was really strong, and I also knew that their engineering program was pretty solid. I think I would always talk about how he was 23rd in the nation, which was really important to me. And there's a fantastic mechanical engineering program. So I really liked that. And so there's a lot of things that enticed me to go there. And I think one of the biggest things was they had a really good team. And I knew their coach, and I knew the coach knew what he was doing. So I really liked that. It had everything that I absolutely needed. And so I was excited to run with that team at the end of the day.
Yeah, I really like Texas Tech. My mom's from Lubbock, so I would go up there a lot, and it really is. Lubbock is not pretty. It's not beautiful at all, but the campus in Lubbock, the Texas Tech campus, is awesome. They got really nice facilities, a good layout, and now Lubbock's kind of blowing up. There's plenty of stuff to do. So.
Yeah. Yeah, I think
you made a good choice.
Just stick to right off campus, maybe it's not maybe the greatest, but I'd say it's fantastic, especially around the area. Oh man, you got Paladero Canyon right in your backyard. There's plenty of trails, and maybe that's just me being the runner I am. Do you want me to share a quick story about Lubbock, Texas?
Oh yeah, please.
You want this? It's going to be my best story. Are you ready for it?
Lubbock needs it. Lubbock needs it. It needs some good PR.
You want a good? Oh, this isn't going to be a good one for Lubbock.
Okay.
You want that? It's up to you.
Yeah. Send it.
All right. So I remember one day I was getting a Subway sandwich. Have I told you this story?
No.
One time I was getting a Subway sandwich, and I was walking back. I remember I got in my Land Rover. It was pretty cool. It's an LR2.
Oh, yeah.
And so I open up my driver door. I throw my sandwich in the passenger seat, and I plop down. And I reach over to grab my belt, or the seat belt. And so I grab that, and then while I'm turned, I hear the passenger door open. And in my head, was like, not a chance that's mine. Or I don't know that I could even process anything. But I come back with the seatbelt, and there's like the largest man that I've ever seen in my life, seated, like with his head on the ceiling of the Land Rover. And he goes, "I need a ride." And I naturally just go, "Absolutely. Where we headed?" And so without hesitation, I mean, I didn't look, I didn't check, and we were on the busiest street in Lubbock. I just grab the shift and I throw it in reverse, and I just back right on up into the busy street, and I just start talking. Immediately, I'm like, I gotta talk to this guy so he doesn't kill me at the end of this drive.
Yeah.
So I'm talking to him, and I'm saying, "Hey, man, I'm so glad I can pick you up." I'm like, "Yeah, it's super hot outside. Can't believe it. Anybody would even let you walk." And so I'm talking, but in the back of my head, I'm thinking, I'm like, how do I get out of this? And he's barking orders at me. He's like, "Turn here, get on the highway." And so internally, I'm freaking out because I think I was just like a sophomore in college. And so I'm just kind of new to the whole world of being alone. And I'm just driving, freaking out, thinking, how do I get out of this? And he's still yelling at me. And then all of a sudden, it comes to me. I go, "All right, if there's one person I can talk to, it's my roommate." I'm like, "This is my best friend. If I tell him something and it's kind of cryptic and he knows something's off, at least if I don't come home tonight, he'll call the police." And so I go, I got to make a call. And so I got my old roommate on speed dial, and I'm calling up Wyatt Keeler. And to this day, I still don't know why this guy did this, but he was like, "No phone calls." He like yells at me, and I already had it going. And so I'm sitting there, and each ring, I was like, if he doesn't answer, I don't know what I'm going to do. Each ring, I'm just kind of getting a little bit more anxious. And then he picks up, and he's like, "What?" And I go, "Oh, hey, Wyatt. I just want to give you a quick call. I just want to let you know I'm going to be late for the meeting." And he goes, "What? What are you talking about?" And I go, I saw a friend on the side of the road, and I just wanted to let you know that I'm going to be late for the meeting."
And is this guy next to you yelling no phone calls? Or is
He's
that
still
just
barking.
before?
He's barking orders at me louder than ever. He's telling me to get off, and I'm like making all these turns, and my brain is not even focused on that. I was just doing whatever he was telling me, and I was like, but he can't kill me if I'm on the phone. And so I was just talking, and this guy is angry, and I'm driving him somewhere, and it is really hot. And Wyatt hangs up on me, and I go, "Well, shoot, that was my one lifeline. I don't think I can just pull that one off again." So for the remainder of that ride, I pretend I'm on the phone with Wyatt, and I'm making up conversation. I'm like, "That workout sure was hard." I'm like, "It's so hot outside. I like blue Powerade." And so we're driving, and eventually he tells me, he's like, "Turn into this neighborhood." And it is like, I ran through some bad parts of Lubbock, but this part I was like, man, this one's a rough one. And I turned in there, and I'm sure it's all psychological. But I remember I pulled in, and it was like, as I was pulling into the neighborhood, it was like in the movies. Overcast, just all of a sudden came in. And I'm like, man, I'm like, this is it. I'm like, this is it. This is going to be fine. I'm like, best case scenario, I just lose my car. And so I'm driving, and then he yells. I'm still pretending I'm on the phone. He goes, "Stop." So I like, you know how you slam on the brakes? And so
Yeah.
and we came back, and he just opens the door, and he takes a step out. He's got one leg on the sidewalk and one leg in my car, and he turns around, and he goes, "I need $20 and a lighter." And I don't know what came over me here, but I went, "No, you get out of here." I yelled that, and he slams the door, and he takes off dead, like Forrest Gump sprint down the street. And so in my head, I'm like, his buddy is across the street ready to shoot me. And so I literally peel out of there, and I drive as fast as I can up until I get to the very first stop sign. And I remember just putting my hands on my head and going, "What just happened?" And so I sat there for a little while, And then I think the best part of the story is finally got back to my apartment, and Wyatt's standing there with his backpack, and he's like, "What meeting am I late for?" And I was like, "No, no. From now on, you got to know if I
Backup plan
like that." Yeah,
Yeah,
no, I got
keep the
kidding.
dead. They would probably found you a week later once you stopped showing up to practice. Or
Yeah, yeah, maybe.
gosh.
Why
So
might
now do you
still be
do like
looking for
a
the meeting.
you do a double take now? Anytime you get in your car, make sure no one's on the other side about
There was
to hop
for
in.
there was a long time where I made sure that as soon as I stepped in that car, I locked those doors. It was that one sat with me for a while.
Man, gosh.
Did I
But so
do?
other
Did I
than
derail your interview?
no, it's good Lubbock stories. But I did want to follow up on you talking about all the trails out there, and that's honestly like the only reason I got into running in the first place was you were in cross country and it looked fun, so I tried it out in high school. But I found over the years like I love running just for the amount of things you can see. Like walking's great too, but you go so slow you can't see a lot. But
Hmm.
if you run, you could go all the parks out there, just the neighborhoods. What were some of your favorite things you got to see while you're running?
I would say just recently, I was just living in Nevada before I moved here, and I will say that when I lived in Nevada, the happiest I have ever been was running those trails with my dog. That's exactly what I got to do. Me and the dog, he's a good, he's just a real good dog, and he could run off leash. And so what we would do is we just kind of wake up and we'd go for our run. And there was a couple times where we'd run about 12 miles just along the government-owned land, the BLM land in Nevada, and we could just run. And so we would run along the canal, and we'd see wild cows and wild horses, and the dog would chase them. And I'll tell you what, it was times like that made it all worthwhile. And it was such a great place to run out in Nevada that kind of got me back into running, because I was running marathons for a while, and I was burnt out. I ran a marathon, it like almost killed me, and qualified for Boston, and then
Yeah, we got to talk
COVID
about
hit. And so, you said you wanted to talk about that.
Oh yeah.
Oh, well, we can postpone that, but I'll tell you, Nevada running was the best. Destinations runs with the dog takes kind of expensive cleaning up the car afterwards, but it was absolutely worth it.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. Like I love baseball growing up, favorite sport, but running is one of those things you can do the rest of your life. So I think it's
Yeah.
important to, whether it be running or I know you and I played a little bit of tennis. That's one of those sports, but have something like that to stay active, and you're never just sitting on the couch the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so you said you chose tech for mechanical engineering too. How did you know you wanted to do mechie? Was it inherent? You always knew you wanted to be an engineer, or how'd you choose that?
I think I knew at a pretty young age, and I was always kind of inclined to do math. Math always felt like a puzzle that I could figure out, and it still makes so much sense in my head to just kind of figure it out. And it's there's an art to it, and I enjoyed that. And
Oh yeah.
so, and I think you can probably relate to that. I remember. I think that was kind of how we probably got along, just kind of out the gate. I remember you were really good at multiplying big numbers or something. Remember that? Is that about right?
I did the math club. I always tried to get you to join the math club, but
I would have had it would have been a great time.
I remember
I think
that physics C was the struggle too. I remember us doing homework for that senior physics class, the AP one. That was a
that was
little rough
that one was rough. I don't associate that as closely with just
with
straight
math.
mathematics.
Yeah.
Like calculus like made so much sense to me. That made sense. Physics, I kind of had, it wasn't as intuitive.
Yeah, it's fun though. I agree. It's like little puzzles. It's like Sudoku, but real life.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I remember it was in college that I kind of found my love for physics, and I used to sit with people that would have physics class. If I just had like an hour and a half between classes, I'd go and sit in their class with them just because I enjoyed it, and it was kind of fun already knowing it. But yeah, I think there's something about math that's really appealing, and so I've always been drawn to it, and that makes me think, MJ, you and I have similarly wired minds. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think the math, the rational, like very the scientific mind. I don't know.
Yeah,
It's
but
fun.
I like
But
math, and I think I would just it made sense that engineering kind of fit with it, and I knew that mechanical engineering, if I went that route, I could do whatever the heck I wanted with engineering. So
yeah,
I just
and
went ME.
you ended up being at one of the top engineering, companies in the nation. Is it your internship is with NASA? How'd
Yeah.
you land that?
Um. So it was with Boeing, and
Oh,
they
okay,
had just
Boeing. Yeah,
won.
still
Yeah,
top
they
company.
just won. They did just win the NASA contract. So when I walked in, they had just won the NASA contract, and
Weren't you in Cape
so
Canaveral though?
I was in Cape Canaveral, and that was a great experience. I'll tell you what, that was something that I would, if I don't know, I would never pass that opportunity up, even though it was tough. It was a tough job.
Yeah, just I mean, you were an intern too, so did they have a lot of kind of mentorship there, or did they just throw you into the fire?
Um, so whenever I started up, it was it was right whenever the government had kind of cut all of the funding for space exploration, and so I remember I started up right then, and whenever I started, they had laid off 70% of the workforce. And
Ooh,
so, just kind of right off the rip, I don't think people really cared for me. They were like, oh, my good friend that I've been working with got laid off, but we could sure bring in this brand new intern
yeah,
that's not going to add a ton of value. That's here to learn. And so, I think that kind of made it so that I kind of had to at least fill in some sort of role there. And I worked on the manufacturing side, we worked the team that was between manufacturing the actual shuttle that's going up to the International Space Station, or the ISS. We worked in between them and the design team. And so I was the intern that was kind of given the job that would call the design team after the manufacturing team say we can't do this. And so I'd call people up on their design that they've been working on for years, and I would say, "Hey, can't use this bracket because I can't fabricate it at in that sort of angle." And I'll tell you, there were some angry people with me, and I was just the messenger, Jay. But that was it was a really good experience because I would then have to kind of go back to the manufacturing team, and we would work together and try to figure something out. And then
that's
I'll
really
tell you
smart
what, I, oh
using the
yeah,
interns to
oh
bear the
yeah,
bad news. That's genius. Never heard such a thing, but you never have to make any
it was
enemies.
so
Just
good.
make the interns do it.
Yeah, I'll tell you, everybody kind of realized after a while that if I was walking up to talk to them, it wasn't typically good news.
Oh man.
Still a good time.
And then so you graduate Meki, I'm guessing 2017.
Hmm.
Is that right? Same. I think we graduated the same year.
That's
And then,
right.
so how was your job search post graduation?
It was really easy. I think having that internship made the job search really easy. I remember I applied for the job in 2017. Figured I wanted to be an engineer, and I think the best experience you can get out was out in manufacturing. And so I applied to be a um, basically a trainee for a process engineer. And so I set up for a program that was going to be between 8 months and a year, and then I'd step up to be either a process engineer somewhere else or take on a different role if it wasn't right for me. But I ended up doing that with Sherwin-Williams. That was a pretty easy gig to land after you have Boeing and NASA on your resume.
Yeah, and
As I imagine, it was
so
probably pretty
how would you
easy.
describe mine's different.
Go on.
I didn't even have, I applied while I was in college, and then you sign your life away for 5 years, so I don't even have to worry about searching for jobs after that in the Navy. But how is the day in the life of a mechanical engineer? Like, what do you do as, like, what's kind of your main role? I mean, I know there's a lot of different options. So just if someone wanted to go into, would you say it's more like the manufacturing?
Um, my role, I, I also had an internship with an electrical mechanical engineering firm, uh, and that was pretty different. But in manufacturing, in the world of manufacturing, right now, what I do is I plan for larger projects. So in manufacturing, we're manufacturing paint. My whole goal is to find the next investment to make paint more efficient and more affordable, and or I guess I could simply say, how can we make paint faster, right? And so, or less expensive. And so that's really all that I do is I do a lot of cost analysis to say uh, what's going to give me the highest ROI for any given situation. So if it's mixing the paint, if I need, let's say we wanted a new blade, right? If we said, okay, there's a new state of the art mixing vessel, and this is going to yield, and I can then create batches that are significantly higher. I could do that if the numbers lined up with how if the money saved lined up with how many additional gallons I was making. So that's basically all that I do as far as planning projects. I look at it like that, and then I go all the way through execution. So I then budget for it. I plan exactly how the installation will be. I contract out any work that couldn't be done internally, and then I would see it all the way through purchase and installation. And then at the end of the day, what I would do is I would then validate that the savings that I expected to have actually came to fruition. And so I'm all the way from calculating if it's going to be the right project to installing the right project to then validating that that project was the right project. So it's a lot of work there. And then on top of that, your engineer is also kind of going to be accountable for making sure that your equipment runs. So there's a lot of work on that end to make sure that I'm out there and my robots are running exactly how they should be running, and that my machines, my motors are spinning the way they're supposed to spin. And so it's a lot. It's a lot of work on the engineering end, just like anybody else in manufacturing.
Yeah, and I
Did that
really
answer your
think
question?
that, yeah, I think it's awesome too. And I think that's why if anyone is going to college and they don't exactly know what they want to do, uh, I think an engineering degree is probably the most beneficial because you're pretty much just studying to be a problem solver because there's so many different fields. Like what you just described there, you also have pretty much a bunch of business experience as well. So having an engineering degree builds you that math base and this general problem solving approach. And I think it's huge. Like you can do whatever the hell you want to do.
Yeah.
But
Oh, absolutely. I think all that I need is just the ability to figure out a problem or figure out a solution. Because I'll give you an example. Is I've been having to deal with railroad work pretty much since I got to Baltimore, and I'll tell you, I don't know a single thing about the railroad, but it's figuring out, okay, how do I work through a problem, and how do I make it more efficient the next time I have to deal with it. And so if you can do
you get a lot
engineering,
of supplies from Bill.
oh yeah, oh yeah, that's the most effective way for us to get our materials in is by rail car.
Really, I didn't know people still use those. I mean, you see them on the side of the road, but it's always kind of empty. I didn't know people still ship by rail anymore.
Oh yeah, we're delivering huge, massive quantities of raw materials over to massive bulk tanks and massive silos, so that we can make paint as effectively as possible. And it's just like if you went to Walmart and you bought a bulk thing of Doritos, it's going to be a little less expensive because you can buy it, and they're able to offload a higher quantity all at once. They can ensure that one sale is going to cover a certain amount of inventory, and so purchasing in massive quantities is something that we can do to keep costs low.
Nice. And there's that perfect amount too, because I guess with paint, it doesn't really, does paint expire, or can you just, as long as you can have a place to store it, you can just load up? Because inflation,
Yeah,
you're
well,
losing 8% every year. So you'd rather have that in paint than in money.
yeah, I'd say so. Well, I think whenever we're selling paint, we want to make sure that we're selling it at the right. Listen to me. I sound like I'm a spokesperson for Sherwin-Williams, but when we're selling the paint, we want to make sure that we're selling a quality product, and so we can ensure it within a certain time frame, and that varies between all of our products. But you want to, as long as you can ensure to a certain degree of certainty, that it's going to be the best quality paint that you can purchase. That's kind of where we set our threshold for shelf life. And then it expires. But
I
honestly,
can't make that
it's
my
like,
new gold reserve.
yeah. Purchase a ton of Sherwin-Williams paint, please, here soon.
All right, so you're out there running with your dog, doing your mechanical engineering stuff, and so you must miss running a little bit or something. You decide, okay, I'm gonna run the Boston Marathon. What went into your thinking there?
So whenever I've since kind of calmed down on my marathon running, but whenever I was training for the Boston, it was a good time. I really enjoyed it. It wasn't as serious as running in college, because after college I was kind of tired. It felt like I had ran really hard for a really long time. My body had taken a lot of abuse. I remember whenever I graduated college, there was 3 months where I was just so happy, like, to get enough sleep. It was unbelievable. I remember I was waking up and I was telling people, I was like, for the first time in my life, I feel like I'm getting enough sleep. And so I was a new person, and I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
And then I think I just started running again. And then one of my old teammates said that they were going to run a marathon in Texas. And I said, if you're running a marathon, I'm running a marathon. And so I started training again and started to fall back in love with running. And then I flew into Texas. I ran the Fort Worth Marathon, and I will say that I probably ran it wrong because I was feeling really good, MJ. I remember I ran dead on pace. I said, all that I need to run is 7-minute pace. I can run 7-minute pace for the rest of my life. I think even when I'm 80, I can run 7-minute pace. But I was running 7 minute pace. I was hitting that
That's to
thing.
qualify for the Boston. You have to run a 7 minute pace.
7 minute pace is going to give you exactly 3 hour marathon. And so I was running 7 minute pace. Boom, 7 minute pace.
Okay.
Like dead on. I was Kennedy Keithka. I said, I'm going to run 7 minute pace. And so I was running it. We started off, it was freezing. It was like 40 degrees outside. And so it was cold, and I was running really slow. And then I got to mile 13, and I said, I'm feeling fantastic. I said, I've run 18.75 miles in the past, and I was dogging it, and I felt amazing at the end of it. So I started to pick it up. And so I remember I ran like 6:45. And I said, I'm still feeling great. So I ran 6:40. And then the next mile, I was like, I'm still feeling good, baby. And then I was 6:30. And then it was like a 6:15. And then it was a 5:45. And I'm like, I'm feeling fantastic. And then I got to mile 20. Mile 20, everybody told me mile 20 is going to be the mile that's going to absolutely kill you. And I remember I got to mile 20, and then I had to stop, pivot, and turn around. And I remember turning around, and have you ever heard the phrase running into a wall?
Oh yeah.
I literally felt like I ran face first into a wall. And then the rest of that run, I was like, thank God I put some time in the bank here. Because then I was like, maybe we just slow it down a tad. And so I brought it back to like 6:30. And I said, okay, well, still a little aggressive, Clark. Let's go with the 7 minute pace. So I'm running a 7 minute pace. I'm like dragging my feet. I'm like, Clark, you've only got 4 more miles. You've already ran so many. And then I remember I was checking my watch like every 2 seconds. I was like, this couldn't be going any slower. It got to the point where I wasn't like bending my knees and driving them forward. I was just kind of swinging them like around to just get them ahead of me. And it was like the last mile was just agony. And I was so disappointed in myself. And then I remember there was one turn that you had to make, and you had like 3 steps to the finish line. And I wasn't on the same planet anymore. I was just, my body was just running. And I remember I ran through the crowd. I just ran right through them. And everybody's like, no, turn, your finish is right there. And I remember seeing it, and I went, oh my gosh, I did it. And then I turned, and I swung my legs. I was so miserable. I crossed the line, and it was like an encroaching darkness on both sides of my eyes. And then I remember feeling my dad come up, and he put his arm around me, and I go, how did I do? And he goes, you did it. And I was black. It was like the end of a movie. And then so I was completely like unconscious. And then I came back, and he was like, all right, you beat 3 hours. You beat the qualifying time for Boston. And that was all that mattered to me. And I do remember there was multiple paramedics that kept coming up to me, and they're like, we need to put you on an IV like right now. And I was so stubborn. And I was like, no, get out of here. I don't want any of that. But yeah, I remember absolutely doing everything that I could to get to that Boston Marathon. And it was going to be the proudest moment of my life, going to run Boston.
And then of course COVID hits, and then they cancel it. So then you don't get to go to Boston.
Yeah, no, They canceled that, and they're like, go run that marathon.
How crushing was that?
It was awful. It was one of the worst news that I could possibly got. What?
Did you say they even had it virtually? Like they wanted you to do it on the treadmill or something? Or?
Yeah, they were like, yeah, but if you want, you can go ahead and just run it, and you can print out that you ran the Boston Marathon just independently. And I was like, get out of here. I'm like, I'm not doing that.
Gosh.
I think running the Boston Marathon.
So how good is that qualifying time for?
I'm not entirely sure. I think it's good for like a year or two. but I could be completely wrong. But I would need to run it again to qualify at this
So,
point.
okay. Did you bring any food with you while because you usually don't run that long of a distance, right? So like, did you bring any food with you during the marathon, or
I did.
how'd you kind of plan that out?
I had some. It's some like high protein or high. It was high calorie uh, things that I could take in the middle of a run. So obviously they've got kind of those water stops and those Gatorade stops that you can slow down and grab. So I did that every now and then. I didn't need it every single time, but at mile 12, I had my dad stand there, and so when I ran by, he gave me packets of gel or and goo, and so I that's the name of it, and so it was high calorie snacks that I could put away. And to this date, I remember I ran by my mom, and she was like, "Whoa, good way to go, Clark! You're at mile 13." And I took it and I just threw it at her, and to this date, she still holds a grudge against that. She was like, "I was cheering you on. You threw trash at me." But yeah, you got.
Oh, that's
I
awesome though.
think
You
that
had your
was the.
family out there too.
Yeah, it was good. It was very cold, and I think somebody took a nap while I was running it. So that was a real sign that I probably should have ran faster. But I also think that one of the main reasons um, why I kind of fell apart there at the end was my glycogen storages were pretty much completely depleted. So I was starving there at the end, and I think my body got to the point where it was eating it was basically it had used all of the energy and calories. It had used all of that, and so it started eating like it started digging into the energy reserves in my muscles, and so I was just falling apart there at the end. But excellent question. I would recommend having a lot more than just a couple of high calorie gels in a marathon. Have a couple more stops of those.
Yeah, yeah. I'm really interested. I know you scoffed me. I want to see. I don't know if we ever do a marathon. I want to train doing it like the no sugar, no grains type thing, and see if you can do it in almost like a ketosis state and how
Mm.
that would go, and if maybe if that would be better way because your body would be used to burning fat. But that's just a theory, so I've never tested it out. I don't know. I know you probably scoff it. I remember we had the debate white rice versus brown rice. I think your liver can't tell the difference, but you were saying like brown rice is better.
Yeah, well, I I might have taken a firm stance for the purpose of debate, but yeah, and also I'm a pretty big believer uh, in just calories being your power source. So I know those are you got your simple and complex carbohydrates, but those complex carbohydrates are what I always I always ensured that I had that's going to burn over. If I was doing a race, I would those would be the ideal power source for my body. So if it was a grain like a rice or if it was pasta,
Yeah,
I
because
always go ahead.
no, I was just thinking because you have your just like you said your carbs, you have your complex carbs, and then you got like the sugars. I think of where sugars you get get that big spike of glycogen, and then your body releases a ton of insulin, and then all of a sudden shortly after you crash. So just like kids, with
Yeah,
cookies, when you're a kid and you have your sugar rush and you're crazy for like an hour, and then you're dead. And then complex carbs, so like your oatmeal or something like that, where you'll have that kind of slow release of the the sugar, and then
hmm
your insulin just kind of slowly covers that, so it's almost like a plateau. It's stable for a little longer, but then
right.
eventually, either you're going to have to get more or you're going to crash again. So that's why I think, you have a third option if you go like fat based and like ketogenic. That's the theory at least. And still got to try this out. Got to do a marathon one day, but where you don't have your body doesn't even need to release all that insulin because you're just using your fat stores.
Yeah.
Um, so I
And
know
that's
it's
exactly.
not it's definitely a theory, but
Yeah. And honestly, basically anything you put in your body, eventually, I guess at the end of the day, it's kind of always just sugar. And so it'll be broken down and used as energy no matter what. So it makes sense. Fats do burn a little bit slower.
yeah, like even the and that's what you got to worry about protein too. So all the people are like all big about protein. If you're not working out and not if you actually don't need all that protein's just going to get converted into sugar. And
Mhm.
so I don't know what's your diet in college. How do they tell you how to eat? I'm sure they're kind of in high school knowing eat whatever the hell you want, but in college they probably say, hey, you should be eating this way.
Oh yeah, yeah. We had nutritionists that were pretty on top of it. I remember it was my sophomore year. We ended up having like they had lunches for all of athletics, and so they always had. I had a personal nutritionist, and really what they encouraged me to do was focus on having about 50% of my diet be those complex carbohydrates, about 25% of it being fats, and then the other 25% being protein. And so it was really easy for me to kind of picture it just if I divided up my plate, that's kind of what I did. And then naturally, you always want to drink plenty of water. And so that was something that I found as I went on was more and more important, especially towards the end, because you fuel yourself right, you run a little bit better. I mean that your muscles can't rebuild, and you're not going to have enough energy if you're not eating right. And I think it's important. I think that's probably that, and like good pair of shoes, and then also running your base. I think those are the most important things that you could possibly do to be a qualified runner, or really honestly a good athlete.
It's good stuff. What about salt? Do you ever take those salt pills?
Oh my goodness, no! I eat enough salt. People say I've got a problem. I just like salt. I love salt, so I don't need to take tablets. You think that might be why I'm
I
such
don't know
a
if you remember. I remember
fantastic runner?
I don't know. I definitely. It must go. I think your body needs the salt. And I know in high school after the meets we would all go to this local Asian restaurant, Asianis there
Eight minutes.
in
Yeah.
in Frisco, and you'd get this big huge plate of fried rice, and there's this little container of soy sauce, and I swear by the time you were done with it, it was half gone. It was like a soy
Oh
sauce
yeah.
soup with some rice in it. I don't know
That's
how you did
exactly.
it.
Nothing has changed, MJ. It's exactly the same. And one thing that I think is a very common misconception, I think people associate like salt with dehydration. They think that salt is dehydrating you. That water is not going anywhere. It's not. It's still in your body. If anything, and this is one of my crackpot theories, but I think that because of the salt, I can then drink more water. Maybe I'm more hydrated because of that. Essentially, that's what electrolytes are. And so I'm not in the.
Hmm.
I believe that I'm not in the wheelhouse that salt's dehydrating me by any stretch of the imagination. That make me more thirsty though. Can you edit that part out, MJ? I wasn't proud of that
And that's
whole.
no, the Navy health standard is going to be cracking down on you because that's what I was cracking up when I go in the Navy and they give you like a red foods which are bad for you, yellow foods which are like you can eat sometimes, and then green foods which eat as much as you want. And the whole basis for that standard is the salt content. So
Really?
it could be, yeah, a totally unhealthy thing to eat, but as long as it doesn't have a lot of salt, they'll say, "Oh, that's fine. It's green. The sodium content's low." So they need to change that.
I don't know. I feel like nutrition is an evolving science still to this date. Because I mean, we talk about ketosis, right? And we talk about complex versus simple carbs. And I swear I think we're just now figuring out how our body processes this and converts. It converts our food to energy. I think it's a new and up and coming science. I think there's still a lot to learn from it. And I do think the Navy is incorrect about the salt content because honestly, if it has more salt, it should be better for you, I think.
Awesome. You heard it here first.
Yeah. All right.
Clark Flint.
I'm an engineer.
So yeah, he knows all. So Clark, thanks for coming on. That was, most all the questions I had for you. I don't know if there's anything you wanted to plug or any last words.
No, I don't think I have any last words. However, MJ and I, or Mike White and I, might be coming out with a podcast here soon.
Hey, anytime. I'll be down. So I don't know. I think we need a new name though. I'm not a big fan of the name.
We can work.
We got to figure out what we're gonna call it.
Fair enough.
All
Hey,
right.
MJ, thank you so much for having
All
me
right,
on.
Clark. Well, thanks so much. Well, that's it for episode number 2. Come back next week to see who we got next. Thanks, guys.